So this was my first story. My second story is about Charles Lapierre. There's a different, turn to it also. Charles Lapierre was actually employed by Visuate at that time, the ancestor of humanware. So Charles, in fact, we hired, he was a student at the University of Ottawa, and, we said, let's start this project with Ark and Stone. And we sent Charles over to Ark and Stone to work with them, so as an exchange program. And what happened is Jim was very wise. What he did, he introduced a very nice lady to Charles. And then Charles married the lady, decided to stay in California, decided to work for Ark and Stone, so we lost the guy, completely. This is the story of how Charles Lapierre got to be involved in the GPS development and later with Sendero. And the third story is about Mike May. Jim and I, 98 probably, Jim's, called me and said, Gilles, because we'd been working on these things for years without having any sales. So at one point we said, okay, what do we do with this technology? And this crazy guy, Mike May, just said, I'm ready to leave with the technology and make something out of it. So Jim called me and said, why don't we give Mike some, all of the software that we developed, the technology and the rights, the intellectual properties. And I said, what's in it for us? He said, nothing. So I said, okay, let's go and sign it. And that's how Sendero was started. So these were my three stories. And I just want to congratulate Sendero for their 10 years, their 10th anniversary. They've been doing great things, and that's just great. So thank you very much, and have a good night.
Hello everyone, Charles Lapierre here, and I just wanted to sort of set some of the records straight. At Carleton University, I actually, as part of my fourth year project, created the first ever GPS system talking with a map of our Carleton University. So I was actually outside in the middle sub-degree weather, pressing a button on a computer, connected to an in-text talker, connected to a big, huge GPS receiver, with big, huge antennas sticking out of my back. And I have that video to prove it, that I was out there. And, oh, good. And so, then Visuate did hire me to to work on this, to try to see if it's going to be feasible. And I did go to California and work with Mike May, and I remember that I had some ideas, and he had some ideas, and we were furiously in a board meeting trying to figure out who was right, and he was insistent it had to be this way, and I was insistent it had to be that way, and finally we both decided we're going to do it a different way completely. So we were able to compromise, and I remember feeling, boy, that guy really knows his stuff, and I think he felt the same with me, and that was the first connection that we could actually work together. And then I left, worked on my master's thesis, came back, and I remember that Lisa Taylor was there, who's here today. Thank you, Lisa, for being here. Lisa and I worked on Atlas Speaks and Strider, and just before I left to go back to Canada, we went to the Saddle Rack Country Bar, and she drove me there, and that's where Claire, who worked at Ark and Stone, brought her sister Teresa and her sister Chrissy, and we were all dancing, and I remember I had a lot to drink, and the Macarena got involved, and then I'm driving home back with Lisa, and I'm like, and she's like, oh, we have to get you hooked up with her. I'm like, which one? I remember I was dancing with like 2 or 3 of them. But we had a great time, and after that I was able to get Teresa's email address, and we started emailing when I went back to Canada, and that's how it all happened. So, thank you very much.
So it's a true story.
Yeah. It is a true story.
Well, and outside of the Ark and Stone and Visuate world and all the rest of this, there's also some other things percolating along. Actually, I heard of a story back as far as 1979. Somebody at the VA was working on something, and then somebody else told me about a story in 1969. A guy was working on something called the Gravador, which was a recording cassette version of your steps triggering after you walked a certain distance and then you made a turn. So the idea of getting around accessibly has been going on for a long time, and one of the people working in this arena is Dr. Jack Loomis from University of California, Santa Barbara, who I got really acquainted with when a huge thing happened for Sendero in 2001. We got a $2.25 million grant that was really the fuel that fueled Sendero's first development. And Jack and a number of other wonderful people, Jim Marston, Reg Gollage, Gordon Leahy, a lot of people were involved in this project, Paul Ponchilla, that made it happen. And Jack is here tonight. He's come down from Santa Barbara with his wife, and I'd like him to say a few words to you, please.
I'd like to thank Charles and Mike for hosting this event and for inviting me. I'm delighted to be part of such an illustrious group and to be able to celebrate 10 successful years of Sendero. I'd like to say a little bit about the project at UCSB and how it began, who was involved, and what we accomplished. I'm a psychology professor, which may surprise a bunch of you, but my field has really been in the areas of perception and cognition. In the 1980s, I became totally fascinated with computers and taught myself to program in 5 different languages. And I saw the tremendous potential of the computer for research and for various applications. So I would like to read 2 entries from my lab notebook of June 1985, which will make it clear how our project came into being. So entry number 1, this has to do really with visual virtual reality. I would like to develop a high-fidelity, full-fledged simulator of, say, a street in San Francisco. The person would walk on a treadmill and sensors would keep track of head rotations. The computer-generated visual scenery and sound would reflect changes in the person's location and in orientation of the head. The perceptual result would be very realistic. Entry number 2. A step down from the preceding would be such an auditory system for blind people. Computer maps, position sensing using satellite system and inertial navigation, and a stereophonic auditory display. Street intersections and important landmarks would be stored in the computer. Speech synthesis would call these out, and special hardware would shape the signals to the 2 ears using time delays and intensity cues. The intersections would be heard in different perceptual locations. So that was what I wrote in 1985. Now, just after that, when this all came up very quickly for me, I then approached Reginald Gollage, who is a professor of geography at UCSB, and a world expert in behavioral geography who worked on cognitive mapping. Reg had lost his sight just the year before, and so I thought he'd be very interested in this project. So I approached him with the idea, and he was extremely enthusiastic, and thus began our collaboration that went on for 24 years until his passing just a year ago. We were joined by Professor Roberta Kladsky, then a professor of psychology at UCSB, and she's now at Carnegie Mellon University. She had expertise in areas of perception and cognition. So we began a program of basic research, and it was more sort of basic research on non-visual navigation, but also an applied research component that dealt with the development of what we call the personal guidance system. So this was being done, I think, about the same time, actually, when Charles seemed to be doing just about the same time that we were really getting things going. Initially, we thought we had a functioning system in 1993 that allowed us to guide people without vision over a route using a sequence of waypoints that appeared as basically as sounds of loudspeakers in the environment. That's what the ideal was anyway. And initially, we had all this equipment. We thought we would have to put it into a cart that the person would carry behind them. But we were delighted to find that we could put it all, cram it into a bulky and heavy backpack. And this was ridiculous in appearance, and it caused many laughs when we would do videos of our system. But we accepted the laughs, knowing that miniaturization would occur and things would get much better. And as Sendero has proved, indeed, things are much, much easier and acceptable to users.